Example, conditional probability. April is playing a coin flipping game with Ben. She will flip a coin 3 times. If the coin lands on heads more than tails, April wins. If it lands on tails more than heads, Ben wins. Let A be the event April wins, H be the first flip is heads, and T be first flip is tails. Now before we actually dive into individual probabilities, I think it would be prudent, be a good idea to go ahead and list out all of the possibilities. To begin, we could possibly flip a coin 3 times and get 3 tails. We could possibly get 1 heads by having heads, tails, tails. Then again with tails, heads, tails, and similarly with tails, tails, heads. So far I have one case where there are no heads, 3 cases where there are 1 head. Now similarly we can do that with having only 1 tail or having 2 heads, same scenario. So we could have heads, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, heads, and then finally if they were all 3 heads, that is the last possibility. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those. Now if you think back to previous sections, each coin flip has 2 possibilities. Heads or tails, heads or tails, heads or tails. If you multiply 2 times 2 times 2, you get 8. There are 8 outcomes, and I just listed all of them. Now we can consider these parts. So part A, compute probability of A. So that is the probability that April wins. Probability that April wins. Now April wins when there are more heads than tails. If a coin lands on heads more than tails. So if there are more heads. So I'm going to go and label these from my list of outcomes, my sample space. I label these with an A to indicate they are places where April would win. So where there are more heads than tails, that would be the case of heads, heads, tails, the case of heads, tails, heads, the case of tails, heads, heads, and the case of heads, heads, heads. And so the probability that April wins will be 4. There are 4 ways for her to win out of 8 because we had a total of 8. So that would be, probability is 1/2. Part B, compute probability of H. That is, the probability the first flip is heads. Now, I'm going to label these as H's for these events. So where the first flip is heads, that would be heads, tails, tails. That would be heads, heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, and heads, heads, heads. So there are also 4 ways for the first flip to be heads. And so that is 4 out of 8, which is 1/2. Part C, compute the probability of A given H. So when you see A given H, that means that the event H is our new sample space. Not all 8 outcomes, but only the ones that were event H. In this case, there were 4 events that had heads first, and out of those, 1, 2, 3 of those, April won. And so the probability of A given H is 3/4. Again, that's 3 outcomes where April won with heads on first, out of 4 where there were heads on the first flip.